is covered in black and white. Taliban flags, checkpoints, and patrols, keeping a close eye on their newly conquered capital. So Ghaffar and his family have to hide. We're not showing his face because for 5 years he worked as a driver for the Canadian Armed Forces, fighting the same militants who now control his country. When the Taliban came last summer, we fled our home in Kandahar, he says. If they catch me, they will do bad things to me. They and 7 other families are holed up in this secret safe house, organized by Canadian veterans and funded through private donations. Food and medical supplies are brought in, so the families don't need to go out. But a few weeks ago, Ghafar's 13-year-old son became restless. He snuck out for some ice cream and was stopped by the Taliban. The Taliban asked me where my family was. I lied and said they'd left the country, he says. They told me to get into their car. The Taliban drove him north to the front lines and put him to work in the kitchen. After 18 days of frantic searching, the family finally found him and negotiated his release. Fortunately, the Taliban didn't know Ghaffar had worked for the Canadians. It was the most painful 18 days, he says. I couldn't eat or sleep. I thank God my son is okay. Ghaffar is one of 2,000 Afghans and their families who supported Canada's military mission and who are now hiding in safe houses across Kabul. The former interpreters, drivers, and cooks show us photos from their time with the Canadian forces. They've applied to move to Canada as refugees. Some have waited months for a response, while others, like Ghafar's family, have just been approved. His youngest is already eager to practice his English. Canada. But even those with Canadian visas are stuck. With few flights leaving the country, a Canadian NGO, the Veterans Transition Network, has been slowly driving refugees out. A treacherous 5-hour trek through the mountains, forced to anxiously cross more than a dozen Taliban checkpoints, which we're advised not to film. Before finally arriving at Pakistan's chaotic land border. In 2 months, the Veterans Group has evacuated around 200 Canadian refugees this way. 2,000 more remain in Kabul, and time is running out. These families just received an email from the Canadian NGO that manages these safe houses, informing them that due to dwindling financial resources, on November 5th, some of these safe houses will have to close, and some of these families will be forced out.
It's going to be a big problem for us because I have nothing to support myself.
Mohammed Omar is a former Canadian Forces interpreter. For 3 months, he's hid in this safe house, along with 50 other families. Last summer, Umar, his wife, and 4 children left everything behind in Kandahar, told to travel to Kabul, where Canada planned to send a rescue flight before the Taliban took control. He says there's no going back.
Right now, the situation in Kandahar is day by day getting worse and worse. Taliban visited each and every individual home.
This Taliban police commander told Global News that Afghans who supported Canada's military have nothing to fear. People are just pretending they're afraid to convince other countries like Canada to accept them, he says. They are safe here. They should not be afraid. Reassuring words, but their actions speak loudest. For 4 years, Darkhani worked security at the Canadian Forces base in Kandahar. 6 months ago, her 23-year-old son was killed by a Taliban bomb attack. And just last week, another son was kidnapped and beaten until he gave them her phone number. She plays us their threatening messages, warning she can't hide. They will find her. The Taliban hates that I worked with the Canadians as a female police officer, she says. When the Taliban says they're peaceful and don't threaten anybody, they're lying. The opposite is true. The veterans groups say they've been told the Canadian government has no plans to fund the safe houses. And if nothing changes, some of those who help to support Canada's military mission in this country will be left to fend for themselves on the streets of Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. Donna?
All right, Jeff Semple in Kabul tonight. Thank you. The future of Afghanistan is very much uncertain. The UN warns over half the Afghan population is likely to face acute food insecurity this winter. The country depends largely on imports and foreign aid for its food supply. And there is a warning from the Pentagon. A senior U.S. defense official told a Senate hearing ISIS-K in Afghanistan and al-Qaeda don't have the capability to attack the West now, but could develop it in the months to come.
The intelligence community currently assesses that both ISIS-K and al-Qaeda have the intent to conduct external operations, including against the United States. We have to remain vigilant against that possibility.
So how are the Canadian government and the newly appointed cabinet ministers responding to all of this? Abigail Bimman has more from Ottawa.
Leaving his first cabinet meeting as the new immigration minister, Sean Fraser heads to a briefing on a file he calls urgent: Afghanistan.
Including specifically the groups that are helping move people to safe houses and ultimately to transit points to help them actually exit the country so they can come to Canada.
Those volunteer groups working to house and help thousands of Afghans who helped Canada say the government is not moving fast enough.
The Afghan people require the financial support of the Canadian government to keep them alive for as long as it takes to get these applications reviewed, to get these applications approved, and to get them on a plane out of Afghanistan.
Afghanistan veteran Corey Shelson says the $2 million raised privately is running out. Safe houses cost up to $30,000 a day, believing it's cheaper and safer to get people out.
It's absolutely heartbreaking to hear about the number of children that are going to be put into a very dangerous situation in the coming weeks.
It's estimated there are about 10,000 people still in Afghanistan who may be eligible to come to Canada, with up to 2,000 in safe houses set to close next week when funds run dry.
We still have the bulk of the people stuck, so we need to know what the plan is to get these people.
While a second former NATO commander in Afghanistan says there's no plan, only a process.
I suspect there is no plan because typically Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada does not concern itself with moving people out of war, out of countries that are in the current condition that Afghanistan is. Call it what you want, failed state.
And it seems the new minister agrees.
I am looking forward to getting a little bit more information this afternoon so we can start to put wheels in motion and get a plan in place to actually make this happen.
As the clock ticks down to November 5th and funds run out, hope is dimming too. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.